Hey guys, it's me, the lit teacher here. And you know that exam that super stresses you out? That one that you go into and you don't really know what to do and you panic and you flail around? Yeah, I'm talking about the unfamiliar text exam. Well, today I'm going to talk you through an actual strategy for how to do this exam that's going to help you pass, it's going to help you get higher marks, and just take some of the fear and stress away from the exam that I see students battle with the most in the English subject. So let's get straight into things. Okay, so I'm going to talk you through how this exam works really quickly. I mean, I'm figuring you know how it is, but if you're a level 2 NCEA student, you probably don't. You might just need a little bit of overview here. Then I'm going to talk through mistakes that I commonly see. So what have I seen in the last 10 years of teaching this that kind of leads to issues for students? Then I'll talk you through why you need a strategy. It's kind of a no-brainer, but I'll talk you through that anyway. And then I will step you through a strategy that you can apply that I have noticed works, and it'll help you do all those things in this exam that you need to do to pass or just absolutely smash it and get that E that you're definitely chasing. Right. So how does this exam work? Well, basically, it's an unfamiliar text exam. So you get a series of unfamiliar texts. These might be poems, pieces of prose. This could be a fiction extract or a non-fiction extract, something from a magazine article or a political speech, for instance. And the unfamiliar thing is that you've not seen them, right? They're unfamiliar to you. Unless you're incredibly lucky and by some miracle you've read them before, but chances are you have not. Then what you have to do is you have to read them, you have to figure them out, you have to analyze those texts, work out what they're doing, what is the writer doing, what kind of language techniques and features are they deploying to make that piece of writing effective. And then you have to write a written response based on a question about that text. So that's kind of how it works. At level 2, you get 3 texts you've got to work through. At level 3 NCEA, you get 2 texts, and then you also have to write a comparative piece, which I'll probably deal with in another video because that's a slightly different beast. So let's move into the mistakes that I commonly see in this exam. Well, besides having no strategy, which I'll get to shortly, the biggest mistake is just ignoring or completely avoiding the question. My goodness, how often do English students seem to forget that there is a question that they are responding to, not just in the unfamiliar text exam, but in the written text and visual text exam papers too. You've always got to remember that there's a question. You've got to go back to that question. You got to base your response around the question. That's what the examiner wants you to do first and foremost. Right. Next thing is just a narrow focus on the text. So sometimes you're dealing with, say, a poem, and that poem could be 12 stanza, right? And you read that poem, and then for some explicable reason, when you write a written response, you only end up talking about like 2 stanza in the poem. You need to consider the text as a whole. Again, I'm going to work this into the strategy and give you some advice on how you can do this and make sure that that's something that happens when you write about the text. The next thing is just a lack of understanding because students rush. So not taking the time to actually understand the text in the first instance, rushing to write a response, and kind of like bombing out because you didn't really take the time to figure out what was happening in the text in the first instance. Fourth down, I've got no focus on language, so ignoring kind of language features, language techniques, literary devices, or conversely, too much of that to the detriment of actual discussion of ideas and analysis of the text at a kind of deeper level. So you can kind of go in one direction or the other, and that's a mistake that I commonly see. Fifth is this kind of chaotic structure because, again, I think this is panic driven. People start writing, they don't necessarily plan or think about what they want to say, and it leads to this kind of crazy structure where you sort of start talking about the end of the text and then you flip to be talking about the beginning, and then you kind of don't even talk about anything in the middle, and it's just kind of like a mess. And last but not least is just generally poor time management. Because you don't have a strategy, because you panic, because you freak out, you don't watch the clock, you don't manage your time carefully, and this leads to bad outcomes too. So these are all reasons that you need a strategy, okay? So a strategy is going to help you optimize time, right? The exam is a race against time. You need to work within those constraints. Every second counts. Having a game plan is going to help you. Having a strategy and routine is also going to relieve stress, right? Because it's going to eventually become an automatic process. It's going to be something that you don't even necessarily think about. Your body, your brain is just going to click into action. And again, you're going to avoid the kind of stress response that you sometimes get in an exam situation. Because it's systematic, as I'll show you shortly, because you work through a sequence of steps, you're not going to miss any key details. So it's a safety mechanism to make sure that you hit all the parts of the exam that you need to hit to get those good marks. And it's also just going to help you rack up those marks, right? You're going to write better. You're going to have a clearer structure. Your ideas will shine because you have a process that you work through to make sure that they kind of come out of that process. And this is all just going to help you nail this exam. So I'm sure you've all just been waiting for the moment where I actually talk you through this. Here's my strategy for how to attack this paper. Right. Phase one, there's two phases. Phase one is the reading phase. This is before you really do any writing. This is before you start jotting down your response on paper. This is just when you're trying to process the text and read it. This is what you do in sequence, and I'll unpack each one in a separate slide shortly. 1, read the question. 2, read the context around the text. 3, read the text for general understanding, and I'll explain what that means. Then read the text for language, annotating and breaking the text up into manageable pieces, and then finally plan a response. Okay, now that might seem like a whole lot of steps, but each one in and of itself is kind of small, and put them all together, it's not a huge chunk of time, but it is a chunk of time that's going to save you time in the long run. So let's get into the first step, which is read the damn question. Okay, my gosh, the question is so important. Please read the question. Now, most of the time, my students will say to me, yeah, but sir, shouldn't I read the text first so that I kind of understand it? No, please don't do that. Under normal circumstances, if you're just trying to enjoy, I don't know, reading a poem, yeah, of course you just read the poem. This isn't normal circumstances. This is an exam. You need to read that text with a clear focus. The question is going to give you the focus. So you need to identify the keywords in the question. They're going to focus your reading of the text in a few steps' time. For example, real question from 2019. Analyze how the writer explores the experience of danger. Okay, the keywords there are experience of danger. In particular, that word danger. I'm really honing in on that word. So when I go to read the text, which was a poem in this instance, I'm really looking for anything to do with danger. That is the thing that's front of my mind that's going to help me read the text and pull the ideas out of it that I need to. And it's going to help me ignore some of the other stuff that's not actually important in my written response. The question is the key to unlocking the text. It's like a huge clue that the market and examiner is giving you. They're saying, hey, this poem's about danger. We want you to talk about danger. When you read the poem, think about danger, please, and then tell us about that. It's a huge clue to attacking the text. If you ignore it, you're missing a key detail. You're not going to do a great job. I had to break it to you. Right, next step is you've got to read context. Okay, so what does this mean? It's essentially everything around the text that's not the text itself. So what does that look like? All right, well, it could be any extensions to the question. I've noticed in some NCEA papers, especially in recent years, they will actually tell you what some of the aspects of the text might be. It might say, key aspects in this text include metaphor, onomatopoeia, hyperbole. Immediately, you've got some information that you can deploy. You can go, okay, when I read the text shortly, I'm going to be looking for that stuff because they've kind of told me it's probably there. It's not usually a red herring. It's not usually a trick question. They're telling you those things could be there to help you out. Next are any glossed words. These are words that might be, vocabulary that's not common to a 16 or 17-year-old student at a high school level. Or it could be like specific cultural terms, in New Zealand, Māori or Pacifica words that we might not necessarily use commonly. They'll give you a little glossary at the end that helps you understand what that actually means. The next one is any kind of notes on the author or the source of the text, right? So it might be that you read the author's name and you're like, oh, I actually know who that is. And I've read their stuff before and I kind of know their style. So that's an advantage to me. There could also be a huge clue in their name, like culturally, that, I don't know, they are a Maori writer. Now, this might not be important, but also it could be super important, especially if it's got cultural themes that you see are coming out of the text. It's going to help you understand the perspective that that writer might be coming from as a Maori person. Additionally, the source of the information can be important too. I've read some non-fiction prose pieces that are extracts from political speeches. And if you read the author, the politician, you know which political party they're from. Again, this can be an advantage to you. It can help you unpack the text a little bit more clearly with a slightly stronger and clearer angle. Last but not least, my golly gosh, read the title. Wow, if it's a poem, especially, the title is not an accident. The title is specific. The title could be a bigger key to unlocking the poem than the question itself is. So read the title. The poet has really thought about why they've named the text that thing. It could be a really obvious title, or it could be a slightly more obscure kind of metaphoric title. But the title is usually important and can help you understand that text even better. So don't ignore it. It's super easy to miss. It's a rookie mistake. Read the title. Okay, so you've read all of that stuff. Now let's get into the actual text. You're going to read the text now for basic understanding. What does that mean? You just want to know what the heck this thing is about. In other words, you're just trying to read the text to get it. Do I get this text? Okay. It's especially important for poems, which can be harder to grasp. All right. So you might get some wacky, weird poem. You're going to have to read that text and take some time, and it's scary to use time for this reason. You want to rush into doing something, but if you don't understand the text at a basic level, then I'm sorry to say you're not going to write on it well. So you need to take a bit of time to understand the text. And at this point, you're going to stop and you're going to ask yourself the question, do I get it? If the answer is yes, then you can carry on through my process. If the answer is no, I don't get what this thing is doing, then you're going to have to read it again. If, after repeated readings, you still do not really get this text at all, like it's a poem that's so confusing to you, you can't even begin to understand it, then what you should do is go and do one of the other texts. Don't waste any more time on this text. Go and look at another one. Get a bit of confidence working through hopefully an easier text for you. And then the strange thing that sometimes happens is your brain begins to process that text that was initially quite confusing. And when you go back to it, you find you kind of get it now because your brain is like doing that spinny wheel thing in the background, like updates like your computer does. And then when you go back to the text, it's kind of your brain's updated and you get it. But if you persevere with a text that you just don't get, you're going to burn time really, really fast. Remember that the unfamiliar text exam is an exam that you can technically pass without finishing. You might get through two of the texts, not get through the third one, but you can get enough marks in your responses to those first two texts that not answering the third one doesn't actually matter, at least for an achieved or even kind of like a low merit grade. So you want to be strategic. You might just need to cut your losses and switch to a different text if you really don't get it. But let's assume you do get the text. What are you going to do now? This is where you get into the nitty gritty of annotation. What does annotation mean? It means you start to scribble notes all around the text, okay? If you've got a highlighter there, you might start like highlighting around the page. You're looking for anything you notice, especially language features and techniques, themes and ideas, or even just questions that pop up when you're reading the text, okay? You're always doing this with the keywords front and center in your mind. Like I said, if the keyword is danger and the poem's about danger, anything to do with danger, right? Look also for key moments. Are there any tonal shifts? Is there a part of the text where it kind of switches for some reason? Maybe it's kind of light in tone and then it becomes very serious. Or maybe somebody else starts like taking over the narration. Any kind of tone or mood shifts can be super important to discuss in your response, but also for the next step, which is breaking the text up into logical chunks. Okay, so what does this look like? Well, essentially, if you're staring at a poem, say, and it's 12 stanza, you might just want to break that text up into, I don't know, three chunks of like four stanza. So what you would do is you would just draw lines and you just break it up. And this will become important when you go to write your response, because I'm going to argue that you should write a response working through each chunk of the text. And this will avoid that mistake from earlier where I said people get too caught up on one section of the text and fail to read the rest. So break the text up into, I don't know, 2 to 3 logical chunks. It could be based on like stanza, uh, you know, at its simplest form, just count the stanza. There's 12. Okay, 3 chunks. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom. I'm going to break it up there. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Boom. I'm going to break it up there. Whatever. My maths is pretty bad. I think I got that wrong. But anyway, you break the text up into little chunks and you kind of work through it in that way. Or alternatively, if you're super onto it, you might break the text up where those turning points occur, because this can help you transition your discussion when you go to write. Okay, so you annotate, you chunk. Okay, now plan a response. Keep it super simple. A simple plan is better than no plan. What I tend to do here is I look at each chunk. And usually in each chunk, I've made some annotations, I've spotted some language techniques. I've probably picked up that some are really important and others maybe not so much. So one thing I might do is just circle the key things that I want to talk about. So like, in my first chunk, I noticed there's a really good metaphor there. There's, some nice hyperbole that's kind of exaggerating the danger that, the narrator is in. And there's also, I don't know, some onomatopoeia there that's kind of helpful too. So I might go, okay, I want to discuss those 3 things. And it could be as simple as me just going 1, 2, 3. Those are going to be my 3 talking points for that chunk. I move into the next chunk. Again, I've spotted some other stuff here. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to talk about those things. And that is as much planning as you kind of need to do, because when you go to write, I'm going to argue you should work through each chunk chronologically and you've kind of picked out the key things that are going to build your discussion. So that can be a really, really simple plan. A plan can just be a few bullet points. Keep it simple. The main thing is that you understand it and you kind of are working through the whole text rather than just zeroing in on one thing that you're going to discuss the hell out of to the detriment of everything else. Okay, phase 2, writing. Now that probably sounds like a heck of a lot of stuff that you've done there. Like I said, if you drill this, if you practice this, it'll become automatic. It'll be a process that you just naturally work through. Phase 2 is writing. I'm going to talk you through 3 steps here. The first is what I call a flipped question intro. It's the quickest, easiest way to get into actually writing. The second is your body paragraphs, which are going to be chronological chunked paragraphs. I've kind of already foreshadowed what that means, but I'll explain it in a bit more depth. And last but not least, what I call an expansive conclusion, where you kind of try to push your ideas out beyond the text a little bit. Let's work through this. Flipped question intro. Okay, flip the question. This is what you need to think in your brain. So I've done all my pre-writing stuff. I'm ready to go. I got a plan. I figured it out. Now I'm going to look back at the question and I want to take the question and I want to turn the question into an active statement that kind of extends on it and tells the marker what I'm going to discuss in a super basic way. The easiest way to do it is to just ditch some of the words that are in the question and then just kind of like add a few more. So for example, here's a question that I've got. It's the same one I talked you through earlier. Analyze how the writer explores the experience of danger. Right. So let's flip that. I'm going to get rid of analyze how, and now I'm turning it into a statement. The writer explores the experience of danger by detailing how threatening the flooded river is. Simple. Now, if I want to get a little bit fancier, I can add a second sentence where I just list off some of the language features and devices that I've spotted, which I will discuss. You don't have to list all of them. I don't know, rule of 3 works quite nicely. So then I go, They do this through the use of language features like hyperbole, simile, and extended metaphor. And that's it. I don't want to go into any more detail. I don't want to rant on in some big extended introduction. If you look at the assessment report for this exam at level 2 and 3, it says do not write a big expansive introduction. Just get straight into the nitty gritty of responding. Flip question intro, it directs, you're literally using the question. So the marker's going to give you a big tick. And it just gets you a little bit of confidence because you've already put a few words down on the page and you can kind of now get into the guts of your discussion, which is your body paragraphs. Okay, chronological chunked body paragraphs, right? Remember how you broke the text up into like 3 sections? Well, guess what? Those are going to be your 3 body paragraphs, okay? I want you to systematically work through each chunk of the text as you've broken it up, okay? Now, why is this really good? Because it's chronological. That means it's in order. You're going to start talking about the beginning of the text, then you're going to talk about what happens in the middle, then you're going to talk about what happens at the end. You're going to work through the whole text. You're not going to ignore part of it. That's going to cost you marks. That's going to limit your response to, like, I don't know, an achieved at best. Super simple sentence starters are fine. For example, your first body paragraph, you might just go, in the first part of the text, the writer, blah, blah, blah. And straight away you're into a discussion. You're talking about what you've spotted in that first chunk. You're, riffing on those language features that you've identified in your plan. Then you go into your second body paragraph. As the text progresses, we see da 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 da. Third one, ultimately the text, blah, blah, blah. Now, you could literally just use those like sentence starters. There's nothing wrong with just deploying those in every response that you write. Yeah, maybe it becomes a bit predictable, but it's going to be a safe way to structure your response and tell the marker through your point or topic sentences what you're going to discuss through each body paragraph. So, chronological chunked paragraphs. Remember all that annotation and planning we did earlier? Yeah, it was for a reason because it's now helped us structure our response. Okay, racing towards the end here. Expansive conclusion. Okay. Write a brief conclusion reinforcing how you've answered the question. Okay. Every conclusion kind of needs to do this. So just point out to the marker, like, this is how I've answered the question, right? And it just reminds the marker that you did actually answer the question. So they're, going to be impressed by that. Where it's possible, I now want you to expand out. Okay. This is what I mean by expansive. Draw some what we call in English teaching circles beyond the text links if you can. The easiest things to go towards are like truths about the human condition or any kind of relevant context and issues. So you might find, in this poem about danger that like something about the human condition is the fact that humans are naive and even in dangerous situations we tend to always like run towards the danger to our detriment. That might be some kind of human truth that you've picked up that you could discuss in the conclusion. Or you could go towards some kind of key context or social issues that you've made some kind of connection to. This is where those contextual clues can be really, really important. Like, for example, if the text is by a Māori writer, like I discussed earlier, then there might be a cultural angle here. Or if it was part of a political speech, which I also mentioned, again, there might be like a political angle that you can work in here. So try to use the context to your advantage. It's going to help you expand out in the conclusion and hopefully rack up maybe a few extra marks that might push you into those merits or even those excellence grade boundaries. Perfecting the strategy. How do you do it? You're going to need to practice this, right? I appreciate this is like quite a lot of things to take in and it's quite a process to work through. You're going to need to do this repeatedly. If you're watching this the night before the exam, I'm sorry, it's probably not going to be super helpful to you. You're going to need to get onto this early and do some practice to drill this. It's like a sports team when the coach is like making them, drill some kind of strategy so it becomes an automatic process. You need to do that. Use time pressure. There's no point applying this to a past exam paper if you're going to spend 3 hours on like one text. 30 minutes, 20 minutes, be really, really disciplined with it. It's going to help you kind of hone your skills and work faster. Revise language features. I really see a very limited scope when it comes to language features. Students tend to fall back on those really like easy, safe ones, like, I don't know, similes or whatever. You got to kind of get into those more obscure ones if you're chasing higher marks. Have you spotted some enjambment or like some caesura or, something more complex? And conversely, are you overlooking really simple things like how is punctuation being used, or even just parts of speech? What are the adjectives doing? Do they have kind of certain positive or negative connotations? You've always kind of got to think about that stuff too, because it's really easy to overlook simple stuff that can be super important in a response. Lastly, be ruthless. Okay, as you get better at this, you're gonna spot more through the annotation process, and you're gonna find that you see heaps of things that are happening. You're going to then need to be selective. You're going to have the opposite problem that you probably have now, which is like you don't see enough. If you get really good at this, you'll start to see too many things, and you're going to have to narrow it down and be strategic. Okay, I'm going to discuss that, but I don't know if I can really go into the weeds on that thing because it might sidetrack me. It might become a tangent that's problematic. You can't always cover everything. You're going to need to be incisive. You're going to need to be succinct. You're going to need to narrow in on what's really important, which is usually stuff to do with the damn question. Okay? The question, the question. That's my strategy for unfamiliar text. I appreciate this is a bit of a long video, but I hope that it's helped you. I wanted to do it justice and talk you through it. I will do a walkthrough of this. So I might take a poem from a past paper and kind of step you through how I would go about doing it. So you can kind of see what it means to chunk up a text. So you can kind of see what annotation looks like and how I might strategize a response. But until next time, ka kite, please like and subscribe my videos. And I appreciate you taking the time to watch what I'm doing. See you later.